The rain fell in slow, hesitant drizzles, tapping against the window pane like a heartbeat caught between memory and longing. For 5 seconds, the world felt suspended, a breath held in a theatre of solitude. You could almost see the fragments of yesterday lingering in the corners, shadows of laughter, echoes of arguments, the gentle brush of hands now gone. That pause, where nothing moves and yet everything trembles, this is where the story begins. I am Dr. A.B., psychiatrist, medical doctor and researcher of human psychology. I have spent years peering into the labyrinth of the mind, understanding how loss reshapes the contours of the heart, and guiding those lost in its corridors toward the light of clarity. Today, I want to walk with you through the fragile, jagged landscape of heartbreak and explore the first steps toward moving on in 2025. Heartbreak is never just an event. It is a slow erosion, a persistent whisper that rearranges your inner architecture. At first, the mind rejects it like a foreign invader. You wake up reaching for someone who is no longer there, grasping at the warmth that once anchored your mornings. There is a sharpness in this void, a mental echo, where every shared memory becomes a phantom touch, reminding you of what once existed. The body reacts too, a hollow chest, restless nights, appetite that disappears in quiet rebellion. You feel both present and absent, like a ghost inhabiting your own skin. The first week is often a storm of contradictions. Rationally, you understand the reasons, the incompatibilities, the signs you chose to ignore. Emotionally, you are an island of raw nerve endings. You scroll through old messages, replay old conversations, and in every smile or word you catch a glimmer of what was, triggering a tidal wave of longing. Here, the psychological insight is subtle but essential. The brain is wired to resist change. Loss triggers an acute stress response, releasing cortisol, and often the mind becomes a theatre of relentless what-ifs. Recognizing this is not weakness. It is the first step in reclaiming autonomy over your inner world. Cinematic moments of grief often arrive when least expected: the scent of rain on concrete, a song that drifts from a cafe, the shadow of a stranger who moves like the one you lost. You may attempt distraction, binge shows, scrolling endlessly, reaching out to friends, but these are temporary scaffolds. The mind craves integration, the merging of reality and loss into a narrative that is uniquely yours. This is where introspection becomes the cornerstone of healing. Begin by acknowledging your emotional architecture. Anger, guilt, longing, and even relief are all legitimate. Sit with each feeling as though it were a guest in your house. Invite them in, observe them, and gradually understand their origins. Behaviorally, people respond to heartbreak in patterns that often undermine themselves. Sleeping too much or too little, isolating or numbing through substances are attempts to bypass pain. Psychologically, this avoidance prolongs suffering. Instead, small, deliberate actions can redirect the cognitive currents. A morning walk, journaling thoughts before they fester, or meditative breathing can gently stabilize the emotional landscape. These actions are deceptively simple, yet they initiate neural rewiring. Your brain begins to learn that life continues, even when grief presses heavy on your chest. Your internal dialogue is critical. How often do you repeat the phrase, "I'll never be whole again"? Each repetition reinforces a neural pathway of despair. Psychologists call this cognitive reinforcement. By consciously replacing despair-laden thoughts with acknowledgement and self-compassion, you reshape your narrative. It is not about false optimism, but about truthfully recognizing pain while affirming your capacity to endure it. Evenings are often the hardest. Darkness amplifies solitude. Memories seem louder in the quiet. Here, visualization becomes a tool. Imagine placing each painful memory into a container, labeling it, and storing it on a shelf in your mind. Observe them without judgment, recognizing that they exist as chapters, not the entirety of your story. The mind can be trained to perceive these memories as reflections, not anchors. Social interactions are another delicate dance. Seeing friends with partners, hearing casual mentions of love can trigger acute discomfort. Yet, vulnerability becomes a crucible for growth. Allow yourself to feel discomfort without self-criticism. Each emotional spike is an opportunity to exercise resilience, to practice patience with yourself, and to observe your reactions without identification. You are not your grief, you are a mind learning to navigate it. By the third or fourth week, a subtle shift begins. The intensity of emotional storms decreases. Moments of clarity pierce through the fog. You recall a laugh without immediately flinching. You walk past familiar places without constricting, and the mind starts to draft a new vision for itself. Internal narratives change gradually, from "I lost them" to "I am discovering me." Healing, in essence, is the reclamation of self, not the erasure of memory. Heartbreak, as I have observed in countless patients, is both a wound and a teacher. It exposes vulnerabilities, illuminates patterns, and forces introspection. The cinematic quality of grief lies in its paradoxical nature. In the very act of losing, we begin to observe the soul. Each tear, each sleepless night, is a brushstroke in the portrait of resilience. You may feel fragmented now, but the human psyche is remarkably adaptive. Your mind, like a river, carves new paths, creating spaces where growth can emerge amidst the debris of loss. As you navigate this terrain, remember that no timeline is universal. Some days will be lighter, others will sting with unexpected intensity. The goal is not to forget or to rush, but to engage with your internal world, gently, persistently, and curiously. Part of moving on is witnessing yourself in grief and recognizing that pain is not the end. It is the precursor to transformation. The first part of this journey is always the most intimate. It is the private confrontation with the shadow self, the raw acknowledgement of loss, and the beginning of building a sanctuary within your own mind. In these moments, you plant the seeds for the next stage: cognitive growth, emotional resilience, and the art of becoming whole again. As dawn stretches across the skyline, the world feels both familiar and newly strange. Light spills across the floor, illuminating dust motes that dance like tiny stars. This is the space where healing truly begins, not in dramatic revelations, but in subtle awareness. You may wake with the echoes of yesterday's heartbreak still clinging to you, yet now there is a whisper of something different. Curiosity. The mind, when given space, begins to reframe experience. You start to notice patterns, cognitive habits, the ways in which grief has shaped perception, and this is the terrain of inner transformation. Psychologically, the second phase of moving on is about embracing your cognitive architecture. Every thought that surfaces, every emotional spike is an opportunity to observe rather than react. You may notice a recurring narrative: "I am incomplete without them," or "I cannot be happy alone." These are not absolute truths, they are neural pathways forged by attachment and repetition. By gently questioning these patterns, by asking, "Is this fact or interpretation?" you start to create alternative pathways. Your mind becomes a garden where old weeds are replaced with seeds of insight, patience, and self-compassion. Emotional growth is less about erasing sadness and more about integrating it. You allow yourself to feel the pangs of loneliness without letting them dictate identity. Each quiet evening becomes a laboratory, observing fear, longing, regret, and even fleeting moments of relief. The cinematic texture of these moments is profound. Watching yourself cry without shame, smile without guilt, or sit in silence without distraction. Healing is relational, but the primary relationship is with yourself. The psyche learns, through repeated gentle attention, that it can tolerate emotional complexity, that sorrow does not annihilate joy, and that the heart, though tender, is resilient. Behaviorally, habits that once reinforced pain begin to transform. Morning routines are no longer mechanical, they are rituals of reclamation. A cup of tea becomes meditation. A walk through the neighborhood becomes a dialogue with your senses. You may notice a smile at a stranger, a laugh at a mundane joke, or a sudden appreciation for a melody that passes unnoticed before. These micro moments signal that the brain is rewiring itself, that emotional resilience is forming not through force, but through repeated engagement with life in its raw, unfiltered state. Reflection and journaling become powerful allies. Writing is not merely recording, it is a mirror for cognitive transformation. Describe the emotions as vividly as possible: the ache, the longing, the flashes of memory, and then pause. Ask yourself, what does this reveal about my needs, my values, my fears? The act of articulating internal states externalizes them, converting chaos into comprehension. In time, journaling reveals a trajectory. You notice subtle progress, shifts in perspective, the emergence of hope. These reflections are not linear. Healing is rarely tidy. Yet even a single insight, I can feel sorrow and still move forward, is monumental. Philosophically, heartbreak forces confrontation with impermanence. The impermanence of relationships, feelings and identities. Accepting this does not diminish love, it enhances presence. You begin to recognize that attachment need not imply possession, that intimacy can exist in memory without ownership, and that freedom is the ultimate act of self-kindness. Cognitive therapy often emphasizes this. Understanding impermanence reframes the mind's approach to suffering, replacing resistance with mindful acceptance. As weeks turn into months, authenticity emerges. You stop performing to fill voids or meet imagined expectations. You choose actions aligned with your internal values rather than habitual attachment patterns. You explore new interests, strengthen friendships, and sometimes simply enjoy solitude without self-criticism. Social interactions shift from fear of loneliness to genuine connection. The emotional spectrum broadens. You are capable of joy, sadness, curiosity, and compassion, often simultaneously. This is cognitive flexibility in action, the hallmark of a resilient psyche. Inner healing is a quiet revolution. You learn that grief is not a linear staircase but a spiral, revisiting old wounds with new perspectives. Memories once sharp now feel like part of a larger mosaic. You notice your heart opening incrementally, not to replace what was lost, but to inhabit a world that has changed. The cinematic quality of this transformation lies in its subtlety, a mourning without dread, a thought of the past without contraction, a fleeting sense of peace that grows stronger each day. Empowerment becomes the natural byproduct of these processes. You no longer wait for external validation or closure. You cultivate it internally. You recognize emotional triggers, not as threats, but as invitations to practice self-regulation. Each setback is a gentle reminder of resilience, and each triumph, a quiet testament to the mind's capacity for adaptation. Cognitive patterns are no longer reactive. They are chosen, refined, and increasingly aligned with authentic selfhood. By the time you reach this phase, identity has subtly shifted. You are both the same and remarkably new. Heartbreak has not vanished, but it has been reframed, no longer a prison, but a teacher. Emotional scars are no longer marks of deficiency, but emblems of survival and growth. The mind has learned to accommodate complexity, to hold contradiction, and to find equilibrium within flux. Finally, the journey of moving on in 2025 is as much about presence as progress. It is about savoring moments of clarity, embracing solitude without fear, and witnessing your own evolution with quiet awe. Healing is iterative, nuanced, and profoundly personal. Each thought, action, and reflection contributes to a mind that is stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the subtle currents of emotion. If you have found resonance in this journey, I invite you to connect further. Like, share, or comment your reflections below, and consider subscribing to PsychKey for more insights into the human mind, emotional growth, and practical psychological tools to navigate life's most intimate challenges. This is more than content. It is a shared exploration of resilience, consciousness, and the art of becoming whole again.